might be in space, but really we're in Philadelphia, because this is Feature Please, a heinous trip at Warp 5. My name is Joseph.
And I'm not trying to fuck your wife. I'm just your co-host, Peter.
So much to get into this week. I suggest, Peter, we just launch into a review. What do you say?
I like it. Let's do it.
What did we watch this week?
We're getting into season... is this still season... It's still season poo.
They got a lot to make up for.
Yeah.
It's still season poo.
It's a big ladder to crawl out of this latrine. Season poo, episode 14, Stigma. Here's the meat and potatoes, Joe. This is Rick Berman. This is Bram Braga. This is directed by David Livingston.
It feels like the first time Brennan and Braga put in a script that fucking actually did something.
Feels like the first time they showed up for work.
Which, like, we did have some good episodes in this season, but they have not been Berman Braga joints. They've been other people have come in and salvaged some things. This is the first time I can say, out of all of the 14 episodes of the season we watched, where I'm like, yeah, they earned their paycheck this week. This was pretty good.
Again, I'm sitting here scratching my head and asking myself, is this as good as it felt? Or is this just good because it wasn't kicking me in the dick? I think this was mostly a legit good. It's got that golden blend of social commentary under Star Trek disguise, and it's not beating you over the head with what it is.
It's a Star Trek classic. They love to pull this trick. They've been pulling this trick since the 60s. They pick a hot topic, they synthesize it through Star Trek, through a legitimate in-universe lens, and then they spit it back out as a story, and it works because they take the effort to make it work within the framework of Star Trek. A lot of people think the best version of that synthesis is an episode of DS9 that at some point we seem likely to review, so I won't discuss it, but this is another version, and spoiler alert, the topic of that they've decided to synthesize is the most early 2000s of topics, and that is, as Rich Evans would put it, AIDS!
Here's the amazing part to me is that was not immediately evident, and I didn't really see that until I was reading the Memory Alpha entry, and I was like, I mean, I guess it applies to AIDS and the gay population, but especially in the wake of shit like Jatrol and what's some of the other the fucking internment camp episode.
Yeah,
it wasn't like a big ass billboard and them putting me in a cannon and shooting my face at it.
Yeah, they were, I don't want to say subtle. I feel like it was obvious when I first watched it, and it certainly remained so upon rewatch, that this is clearly what they're talking about. Stigmatized behavior. They make a real effort of like minority, intimacy, stigmatized behavior, degenerative disease with no cure. Like, all of the elements are there, and they are very specific. So is it a sledgehammer they're hitting you over the head with? No. It is a foam bat. But they do it in a way, and this is, I think, the part that really works. They tie it in to the continuity of the show.
Yes.
And they tie it in to T'Pol's change in character. So, yeah, it's a special episode that has a very specific thing it's trying to say about a topic, but it works in the context of it being in Enterprise in season 2 around the things that have happened.
Yeah, but then it's got like this layer of 2022 AAA cosplay where they have taken this political message, this societal message, we'll say.
Yeah.
And they put it into this Vulcan plot that clicks on every level. And again, like the best parts for Enterprise to me so far, aside from Shran and Jeffrey Combs, is how interesting they have made the Vulcans. And this is in the wake of Voyager and Tuvok. The idea of a finished character, of a complete person, of a textbook Vulcan being so difficult to write a compelling story about, that them putting some dirt underneath the Vulcan's fingernails, making them a little shady, making them less than ideal, has really been a compelling story. And this is a great entry into that. And I really, really enjoyed it.
And
Now,
I just one last thing on that note that you just mentioned. I agree that is a huge point that works really well for Enterprise and has worked really well to date. And the best thing I can say about this episode is this is really just the beginning of not just this specific plot line. Like this disease thing doesn't just get forgotten, right? This continues for the almost the entire run of the show. And is just one of many additional layers on the Vulcan story that will eventually be the best story they tell.
because real quick, I mean, here's what's on the board as far as this. I don't know if this is an A plot or I guess this would be the A plot,
This
right?
is the A plot, yeah.
You've got T'Pol's change in attitude. You've got less than desirable elements of Vulcan civilization that clearly need to change. This goes right back to the Vulcan Cenobites. I mean, that's some really great callback, and all the stuff getting into like her trauma and stuff after being attacked by what we call them first officer date rape.
Yeah, I mean, she was raped. She was mentally raped. I mean, that is that how they have portrayed it and how it is referred to here. So I don't mind calling it what it is. Which, because what I think is a fair assessment too. By the way, I think a forced mind meld for clearly intimate reasons is akin to a violation that makes a lot of sense to put it in that context.
I think it would be it's a clear cut attack. I would call that event in meld an attack. I think that this episode pivots it more towards a intimate sexual parallel, where at the time in meld, I think it was portrayed less as I'm just into you and I want to get all up in, and more of a I want people in our cult, and if I can help you if I can force you to experience, it's going to open your eyes and show you the delights of Vulcan hell here. And I'm not bothered by the direction that Stigma was able to pivot it and the way it plays into that.
Yeah.
Her reasoning towards the end about not just outing what happened. So you've got this real strong, tight, highly polished, I think, A plot. And then, because it's Berman and Braga, and we can't say no to boobies and sexy time,
You got to have a horny B plot.
This is the fucking, like, what, the third time now that they've had, like, dire consequences A plot, and then, like, someone with a kazoo on a skateboard roller skating backwards at a disco.
It's right back to Reed's favorite food.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say they get points back for the fact everyone keeps their clothes on. So it's horny in a way that is not exploitive of people's appearances. And the dire consequences are very personal. So it's not like the ship's in peril.
No.
This is a very specific to like 3 or 4 characters. So the idea that like Trip, he's not involved in the A plot, right?
And that's going to be a fault I'm going to bring up later.
And because he's not involved in the A plot, him having a B plot with Phlox's wife wanting desperately to bone him, and him being too country boy Southern gentleman to accept, it works fine for me. It's not as jarring as what's Reed's favorite food. Can you find that out in between the alien invasions that are causing people to go into comas after they've been butt probed? Like, not as bad, you know?
The silly your wife wants to fuck me B plot in this, it's not bad.
No.
In fact, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great look at Denoblian culture.
Yeah.
His wife is a great guest actor. And everything across the board is great. Why does it have to run up alongside a premier A plot?
Yeah, why does it run up against the Star Trek version of Philadelphia? You know, like, why are we doing this?
Were they afraid that they were getting too intense in the A plot and this was here to buffer things so people didn't feel uncomfortable?
I think so. I think you're right there.
Well, fuck that. All right? Because you've got an episode that easily could have stood on its own feet and should have included Trip heavily into Paul's woe in this. And then I go through my journal of the season of poo. Dawn, trash. Catwalk was good. Precious Cargo, uber trash, just all this bad, ugly shit. Fucking strike out 3 of those episodes and just give me, a trilogy of The Seduction of Trip by Mrs. Phlox.
Just give me, spread this comedy beat out. Like, have her be the reverse Lexana Troy, where it's not that she's like a bad person that no one wants to be around, or very like the annoying in-law and mother-in-law. It's actually that like Trip is just too much of a gentleman. He just can't sleep with someone else's wife. It's just against his morals. Like, play that out several times. I'm in for it.
You could have taken any other you could probably have taken most of the other episodes from this season and condense whatever they were doing to be the B plot or the A plot to this plot line, and give the other one to it.
We're at the halfway point. So let's review. Shockwave Part 2, C-. Carbon Creek, C, but like also shouldn't have been there, right? Like kind of a waste of time, but not terrible.
What if that was the A plot to this B plot, and like Trip was like ducking in and out of like T'Pol's story while he's trying to dodge her, jump his bones?
I mean, that would have been more, that would have
appropriate,
synthesized better. Yeah. Minefield was okayish. We just hate Reed. And then Dead Stop was probably the better half of that because it was a little bit more
that wouldn't have
interesting.
really fit, but
and then you get Night in Sick Bay, uber trash. Marauders, trash. The Seventh, trash.
Take Night in Sick Bay, have his wife on there, and have all the other nonsense going on, and Trip keeps, trying to duck his wife, and that's pissing Archer off more. This B plot could have enhanced almost every other episode this season. So ridiculous that you are dulling the tip of the spear that Stigma is slicing through season 2 with this.
Anyway, let's talk about the thing. Let's break it down.
Do you want to do a full A plot, B plot instead of trying to run these things parallel?
Since they're so incongruous and they don't intersect in any meaningful way, let's do the A plot, and then we can kind of conclude with some fun with the B plot. A plot. We have the teaser that sets up what's happened, which is, for whatever reason, and we will find out here over the course of the episode, T'Pol is got some kind of serious illness. It has progressed. There is not a cure. Phlox has been treating it, and it's gotten bad enough that Phlox has indicated he needs to seek outside help. Specifically, he needs additional Vulcan research if he's going to come up with treatments for this disease. And the consequences put on the table immediately are, if I don't do this, you're going to die. Okay? So teaser sets you right up. Like the stakes are max. This is a disease plot. This is a bit odd. Apparently, this has been going on for some time. There's a mystery and there are stakes.
There's a third part to this that you're not mentioning.
Yeah. Secrecy.
No, well, there's the secrecy, but also more interesting to me is all of a sudden there is a overwhelming fear. I don't know if it's a desire to stay or a fear to go home. But the options available to T'Pol are, we deal with this here and you probably die, or you admit what's going on and try and ask the science directorate for help, to which T'Pol says they will almost, and they will force me to leave Enterprise, right?
Mm.
You jump back to, I can say at the bare minimum, was it, Shadows of Pajem, where she's supposed to get turned over to the Vulcan ship, and instead they run this one last mission together op, right?
Correct.
And I want to say there's maybe been another entry too, where part of the plot is T'Pol's going to have to leave. Archer desperately does not want her to leave, and Archer moves hell and high water to keep her on the ship. And at no point does she ever really express, I want to actually be here.
In fact, she expresses the opposite in Shadows of Pajem, right? Like, she's like, why the fuck do you care so much?
Yeah. I'm not thrilled about it, but it is what it is, and life moves on. As contrasted by this, where at least in the beginning, you would think that her husband is serving on board this ship and she does not want to leave this under any circumstance. There's something she loves being there and she does not want to leave. And I don't know if we missed a beat at some point, but I still don't feel like she ever really came out of her shell. So maybe that's to come, and she's going to have a big reveal later on. Like, I really love you guys and I need to be here or whatever. But
She is slowly showing that, in my opinion. Like, they did that with the catwalk, where she went into movie night and engaged with it in an authentic way. And Trip's like, hey, can you hang out with us more? You know, like, piece by piece, she's started to have more of an affection for what's going on around her. And it started really in Shockwave Part 2, where she like stood up to the Vulcans who wanted to end the mission and said, you need to not fuck around with this. Like, the humans are onto something here, and they need to be allowed to go out here and like put a marker down that checks not only everyone else but us as well.
I'll even go back so far as the one, I think it was the ice comet, where she gets tapped to go back into her arranged marriage.
Oh yeah.
And I think that was really the first instance of her opening up a little bit and not wanting to leave with, but she doesn't really express it. We see it in her private scenes, but I don't know. So this has been going on a while. This is the first time she's in front of anybody else been like, I don't want to leave.
Correct.
So yeah, is this a Vulcan planet they're over, or is it just like some other?
The Kendi 3, I think, is just a random planet with people on it.
Oh, well, I'm going to air quote people, because it's been a while since we've seen some mid-90s LucasArts.
I mean, it was
Jedi
straight
Knight
up
1.
Yeah, it was a PS1 cutscene is what we saw when we got the CG here. We were praising the CG on Catwalk with like, oh, it looked great. The lighting effects, the detail looked good in HD. This looks like such garbage.
This looks like Command
HD.
and Conquer 1.
Yeah. Yeah, like FMV cutscene, and not in a good way.
It
Like Tim Curry's nowhere to be found, you know what I mean?
Like these guys were just extra characters. These guys are extra characters from Clay Fighters.
Yes.
It might as well have been an episode of Gumby is what I'm saying. They zoom in, whatever. Phlox has got 3 Vulcans who I think are all a great pick. There's 2 older ones and there's a younger guy. And Phlox's con here is that he's saying, hey, I need information about your super rare Vulcan secret disease, because there's a parallel that we're dealing with in Denoblius, and I think I can take your research and do something good. It's not a bad con. He is a much better liar than Jonathan Archer. This is a good lie.
It is a good lie, and I think this is the one of the first episodes where I feel like Phlox, as an excellent practitioner of medicine and doctor, is established, which is something that I think gets better established as they go on, and ends up being very well done on their part, where he's treating very seriously his obligation to treat T'Pol, to do everything in his power to not only make sure T'Pol is taken care of in terms of her disease, but like that her confidentiality is respected, you know, like that everything is being done that can be done in addition to taking care of her social needs, like not outing her, right? Like, it's not just, you need to be treated, so I'm going to sell you out to your people and they can actually treat you. It's like, I'm taking care of you, the way you want.
There's also a great element to this, which is it's all happening behind Archer's back.
Yes. He's not happy about it later on.
But
like, understandably so. Like, he doesn't give him too much shit.
Right. But, again, coming out of Voyager, where by the end everybody was fully involved in everyone else's business and it was a family, like there is still walls up between these people. I'm not saying it should have been there, but I would have appreciated if part of Archer being butthurt was like, we should be past this. You should be able to trust me. I've gone out on a limb for you. You've gone out on a limb for me. We got.
I've heard that you have a terrible disease and you didn't tell me that so I could help you. Like, sure. You think I would tell people? Are you kidding me? Like,
sure.
Come on, the dirt we've done already. My confidentiality is sealed.
So these Vulcans are dummies, right?
Yeah.
something
Yep.
smells off. This is they've got a little Seska in them. They're like, let's circle back around to this.
Yeah, Phlox's lie isn't bad, but it's still too cute by half. It's a little too perfect. It's a little too clean. It's I just need the information. I can't verify why I'm asking for it very cleanly. You know, it's like the perfect cover when it's perfect gives it away.
Here's what I like about these Vulcans is I get major Tremere vibes off of them.
Yes.
Right down to
in his regent. Yeah.
Right down to the. Sorry if you guys you're not into Vampire the
Yeah. You
Masquerade.
have to suffer. This is a chantry right here.
Yeah, and they go and they're like, listen, we want to do a follow-up meeting just to, make sure we got our facts straight. So they fly up to the Enterprise, which, according to Memory Alpha, their shuttlecraft is the fucking Ferengi piece of shit from Acquisition. No, from False Prophets.
Oh,
this is a tainted evil ship, Joe.
Oh, no. Can't have that.
They go, well, Captain, we don't really need you. We don't want to talk to the doctor. We want to talk to T'Pol. Hey, walk us through this. And basically, they're trying to get her to admit that, hey, I'm sick with this shit. Or the doctor admit he's lying. T'Pol's getting her back up a little bit because she sees what's going on. Hey, can you read off these names? She looks at it, and I'm pretty sure, and I like their terminology here, right? They roll out the carpet further on this. So we'll find out the analog to essentially gay people, right?
Correct.
Which, again, I did not pick up on at all, and I thought that was real clever. But the outcast element, the minority element here are Vulcans who have a genetic predisposition that allows them to establish mind melds. And that in of itself was crazy, right? Because everything from TOS, Tuvok busting this thing out left and right, like everything 24th century or even Kirk era forward, this is NBD, right? They teach you how to fucking mind meld in preschool, I'm sure. So very interesting world building here that this is basically a mutant power. And they call them melders, which has the right amount of like backhand derogatory.
Yeah, it feels like a pejorative. So it's right on it.
This is a thing that's limited to just this second-class citizen that we're not really keen on. You're not fraternizing with them. You weren't, are you part of this? You're not involved with it, whatever. Hey, read off these names. Here's a pad. And I'm pretty sure that some of the Vulcan Cenobites from Meld were actually on there. Things fall apart. They leave, whatever. But little do they know, that wasn't a pad that the Regent just dropped, that the Tremere dropped on them. That was a bone of lies.
It was. They got a sympathetic link. They got a
might even have been a stone of the true form. They're fucked. Yeah.
Oh no! It was a vessel of transference. That's what it was. Vessel of transference got a point of blood. That means you can take it back to the chantry. You can work some mojo. You can do all sorts of bullshit now.
They put it in what's very clearly a modern day flatbed scanner full of sand.
Get that paper flesh ready, my boys and girls. We about to strip some fortitude. Jesus okay, that's all right. It's enough. Okay, I'm sorry.
Give me flashbacks.
Except to Truman specifically. We apologize to everyone else. Truman, that was all for you. So the point is, they get her DNA. They figure out she's got the disease. The game is up because they're, they thought it was all sus. And so when we turn back to the plot, they have now told Archer, yo, this is the state of play. Phlox can't come back to the conference because he lied. Fuck him. And,
got kicked out of the con.
I might decide, he got kicked out of the con because he stank.
Mm-hmm.
And, I might take your science officer, TBD, right? Like there hasn't been like a full decision made there yet.
There's two things at play. One is the doctors can basically, and this is...
They can medically invalidate people and make them go home. That's kind of the implication. Is like the ranking doctor in a sector can say, you are medically unfit to serve, head back to Vulcan.
And then there's further repercussions that could happen if Vulcan high command gets involved. I like the introduction of the scene where Archer calls Phlox and T'Pol in, and his opening is, well, it's been a while since I had my face rubbed in shit by Vulcans, so thanks for doing that.
My least favorite thing, so thank you.
What the fuck is going on here? You guys are lying. You're making me look like a clown. This is all real ugly. And slowly they go ahead and open up. and we find out that T'Pol has contracted this thing during meld because one of the Vulcan Cenobites who was able to establish the mind meld was already infected with this neurological degenerative disorder. But again, as we already said, it wasn't consensual, and they really, I think they play. I have to go back and listen to our episode on that. If like we shit on the episode for not being more that her lack of agency and being attacked there and downplaying it, like what the real effect there was. But the great line here is Archer going like, "Oh yeah, you were attacked. I remember. Well, you weren't the only one attacked to Paul, and I'm sure Archer remembers that because right after he attacked her, Archer pulled him into that little surprise, like I'm gonna goad you into beating my ass. I was attacked too. That was one of the best nights. I got slapped all over my
I
quarters.
got the super strong Vulcan whooped my ass so hard. I got so many concussions.
Luckily,
Felt
I had
so
6
good.
guns taped to various underside table surfaces and under my bed cushions.
So after I came, I just grabbed a gun and I took him out. I was able to take him out.
Yeah. I remember Stardate, whatever. Yeah, I beat off thinking about that like 4 times a week, man. That's a
That's in the
spank
spank
blank
bank. Yeah, absolutely. For life.
emeritus.
Absolutely.
I will never forget the feeling of that man's hands on my body.
So the next part of this plot that happens, I believe, is
well, you
them getting
missed
the
the chance there for a sec. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the next thing that happens, I think, is that they get contacted by the young apprentice. Right? Is that the next step? Is that they get the information from him? I think so, because the hearing happens after that. So I'm pretty sure there is no. He probably. I think the order of events is he storms down to the planet and says, "I read the fucking Vulcan bylaws. I read the peripheral code."
No, not even that. Like he
Yeah.
goes down first to try and plead her case because
Oh,
she's
that's right,
basically given up.
Yeah.
And again, like she
And they make him wait. That's the thing. They make him wait on purpose just to say "fuck you."
It's honestly a blur. There's it's a T'Pol episode where it seems like she has a lack of agency, but at the same time, her inaction is an action because the byline through what she's doing is that I don't want to make a big deal out of this because I feel bad for this minority. And if I say, hey, one of these guys in the minority just so happened to live up to all the awful stereotypes you have, it's going to reinforce it and terrible things might happen. So I might have to fall on the sword here. And it's a noble line she has. But the bad part of the episode for me, the worst part of the episode is it brings out all the worst traits in Archer.
Yeah. He gets real petulant, real angry.
No
goes
chill
down there. Yeah.
whatsoever.
None.
The dude's like I don't know, like a frenzied gorilla crybaby that doesn't, he's not like the Hulk down there ripping the walls apart. He's just waving his hands around crying, and he's just an emotional mess the entire time that he is interacting with the Vulcans on any level. And
when he goes down to plead his case, he gets pissed off. When he goes back down later with the peripheral code and says, "You owe me a hearing," he's still pissed off. Like when they go to do the hearing, he kind of finally does button up a little bit, and that plays out a little differently. So I'll grant some credit back for that. But as usual, he seems very ungoverned by his emotions in a way that is not leadership material. You know?
And I would say that he's under duress enough times, like Night and Sickbay aside, he's been under the gun and he's been in some pretty nasty situations before, and he never falls apart into this emotional catastrophe like he does here, unless there's some Vulcan component in play. Like he is so bent out of shape by Vulcans, it makes me wonder if like they did something to him personally behind the barn, and like this dude's like got emotional trauma because nobody else can get him wound up like this. So there's a mess of scenes where he is trying to fight on her behalf, but she has placed these shackles on him where she says, I'm worried that if they find out that I was actually attacked, that it's going to further persecute these melders, and I do not want that to happen. You have to promise me you're going to keep that a secret. and I respect him for keeping the secret, even at the cost that they might lose the case and things are going to fall apart. Like,
Yeah,
he
he finally
shows her
does
that respect.
actually. Yeah, he does what she asks. Finally, right down to the last second.
She's already been basically condemned by the doctor. Archer plays the like, no, we're going to have a tribunal. I want to plead my case, and we're going to have a lawyer episode.
Call 3 regents. We're doing it.
The doctor group the little chantry has not yet contacted Vulcan High Command, so there's it's not as bad as it can possibly get, right?
Right. There is an opportunity here to potentially still convince them.
The sympathetic doctor in the group,
yes, the young apprentice,
discloses that he is in fact a thin blood himself.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
a Diablerist himself. That this guy is actually a Melder too. I didn't like that his sympathy seemingly only exists because he's got direct skin in the game.
That is a bit of a miss, and that is a classic hack storytelling move from like the early period of like trying to create these sympathy episodes, that if the person isn't part of the group, then somehow them being sympathetic to them won't play as well. I completely agree. It needed to be that this guy was like, no, I'm not a Melder. I just think all of this is nonsense. Like, this shouldn't exist, and you shouldn't be subject to, potential death sentence and not be treated and then be stigmatized because you fell victim to someone else violating you. Like, none of this makes sense.
He had a real strong lead up to. He said there's more intolerance now than there was 200 years ago. And I think
it was 2,000 years ago.
And I was like, all right, this dude's like a progressive, and he's a young. And then he's like, yeah, I am a Melder. And I'm like, yeah,
did you have to be? Did you also have to be space gay? Like, did you have to go that route? Come on.
It undermined the episode. It didn't kill it, but I think it would have been stronger had they not gone down that way. So you've got this. In a lot of ways, it feels like a very Voyager-like episode, and I say that in a good way, right?
I do too, yeah.
I don't know. At some point, the letter comes up that, hey,
I want to explore that. It feels like a Voyager episode thing before you get off it.
Sure.
So, why
I'm feeling blue balls. The blue ball guitar.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example of an episode that feels similar to it because I was the one with Senator Kelly in it too, right?
Yeah,
and they were telepaths.
Mm-hmm.
This gives you Voyager vibes because Voyager had this soft touch on some of the plots of some of its better episodes that feels like is here. This isn't super hard sci-fi stuff, right? Like, it's a disease, there's treatment. They don't get into a lot of technobabble, right? Like,
there's
it's
no
just
bad gunfights.
It's everything about this episode feels very relatable and is very easy to understand what's going on without, in the Star Trek sort of icing over it helps tell a bigger story, but doesn't complicate it. And when Voyager succeeded, I felt like that is the vibe that they were able to capture. Like, and this is kind of our bitching about a lot of media that's come out in the last 2 years, right? It's all the spectacle's great, but the substance completely sucks. It's all hollow and by the numbers and has no soul. And this feels like it has a story and a soul and a real nice soft touch to it that draws you in and makes you feel invested about what's going on. And Voyager did that quite well. And I think I used to credit that to Kate Mulgrew because she was an actor who was used to delivering in that kind of circumstance, but clearly that other folks are capable of it as well.
I think this is the least Enterprise episode of Enterprise we've watched.
Yeah,
none of the Hallmark stupid.
It feels like a Voyager episode because they're like in some random planet and there's a conference and it's like busy and they're like like having shore leave and stuff. It reminds me of
nobody gets punched. There's zero action, and as
Mayweather has his shirt off. But for unrelated reasons.
Talking about this A plot, it's so easy to completely forget that there is someone wants to fuck trip B plot. That's where all the sophomore hijinks are going to be hiding. Even though they're done well, it taints this thing.
Doesn't belong. No.
So what happens? She goes down, she gets the discs. They think they might be able to fend it off, but
And then
then
she winds up with the tribunal. The tribunal happens, and that is where the young apprentice says, "Listen, I am also a melder, and I am going to go ahead and say, the truth here, which is she got she got victimized. She should not be punished because someone needs to say this and save her because she's a victim and not like someone who should be prosecuted or persecuted rather."
well, there's an important scene prior to that where the letter comes in that she's been relieved of command and that, the hammer is being dropped. And that's important to me because Archer brings her up to give her like the bad news and chooses to deliver the bad news by making her sit at the dinner potty. The dinner potty is not only for dinner, it's not only for potty, it's not only for having dinner while you're on the potty
or interrogating
people. It's also for delivering bad news and hey, we're gonna have to break up. So it's also the Dear John
dinner
potty.
Yeah, the Dear John dinner
potty. Available now.
But they eventually get to the climactic scene where the young doctor says, "Hey, I'm also a melder. I'm space gay. You shouldn't prosecute. God, I keep saying that. You shouldn't persecute T'Pol because she was victimized." And the conversation kind of ends there. And the end result is the young doctor has been relieved of his duties because he outed himself as a space gay. But they believe the story that T'Pol was victimized and they will not act upon her employment. And importantly, Phlox believes that the research they now available to them will allow him to continue to treat the disease without it leaving its initial stages for some time to come.
This has been another really good part of the A plot is that the amount of research that is available on this is almost non-existent and actionable efforts taken to resolve this even less because this is happening to an undesirable segment of the population. It is essentially being viewed as a problem that fixes itself. So why would you try to stop this thing that's killing off your undesirables? And if it catches a couple other people in the process, well, they shouldn't have been associating with them in the first place. Phlox's criticisms of the Vulcans saying like this is a 5-year-old should have been able to make more progress on this than all of the Vulcan Science Directorate has, given the information that this guy was even able to pass along to me. Real compelling stuff. So by the time this ends, it's not a win. There's been casualties. This sympathetic Vulcan has sacrificed himself on behalf, and that was cool too, right? Like he recognizes like this lady is gonna die and she's losing her career because she's protecting my people, and then he reciprocates the act and throws himself onto the grenade and saves her a little bit. So that's a cool back and forth. Like you said, she's not really cured. She's bought more time, but there's still a problem. And it gives Phlox an opportunity to push his medical thing. I'm sure I could sit here and say like, hey, we're going to talk about, natural selection and all that. And dear doctor, but I'm going to leave it to you guys to draw your own conclusions at home.
Sometimes the episode's good enough that old wounds can start to scab over at least a little bit. That was good.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about the B plot. Let's talk about hot wives and swingers and denoblians.
Rick Berman, all up in.
I loved the information you get about denoblians, both explicit and implicit in this episode. And agree that this is all well done. It doesn't belong in this episode, but I really liked it because too often Star Trek does tell you too much, right? It just blah, 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 blah exposition. This is a circumstance where you get told some things, but other things they just let you figure out by seeing what's going on. And the key thing in this subplot is denoblians have zero hangups about physical intimacy. They are all polygamous. So that's like clue number 1, right? And clue number 2 is because they're polygamous, sexual exclusivity is not part of the intimacy of a relationship, which is clearly separate. So they marry people because they want to have close association with them, but because they have three different partners, they're spending limited time with each, and
There's
this
very little. There's a high population density on Denoblius, so these people have a small sense of personal space. There's a
right.
lot of touching. And let's jump off on that. I've Was it Dear Doctor where he has his date with Cutler? Has
Yes,
to be. Yeah.
yes,
It's
it
easy to
is.
forget that there is more to Dear Doctor than
After
willing genocide.
crazy last 15 minutes, yes. The rest of that episode was actually quite
It
interesting.
was very good. That's why
Yeah.
Dear Doctor's fucking terrible, is that they took what should have been a great episode and they rubbed poop in its teeth. Cutler kissed him and he flipped out. So, like, that's the one taboo I think we know about Denoblians, is like mouth on mouth is not okay, right? And
Well,
they play it up here because, like, they never kiss. They, like, get close and they smell a little bit, but they're not putting lips on lips. And that's where the aversion to physical contact ends.
I feel like that it's a bit of a retcon of the lack of physical contact because fucking Phlox's wife is making all kinds of
She
physical
basically
contact.
gives him a foot job, right?
Yeah, like just all up on him, very physically contacty. I think that like Phlox specifically might not be okay with physical contact, or maybe it's like if it's not someone you want to be intimate with, you're not comfortable with it, and he wasn't comfortable with that with
I think it's just a kissing thing, and
Cutler.
that's
Okay.
that being a trigger works. You know, all the dumb shit from Night and Sickbay with the cum monster alien providers, the donors
Yes.
of the jizz monster.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their whole thing was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you ate in front of us." So, like, I buy in the Wild West Alpha Quadrant that there's a lot of races out there that are real particular about what happens around the mouth.
Okay, I'll buy that. But yeah, getting a good waft of someone's pheromones. Apparently, that's quite intimate in Denoblia, and we see their smile. You know, like at the female version of the big toothy grin. And Phlox is beloved, as he so oftenly puts. I believe her name is Feasel.
The Fiso.
So Feasel Phlox. And she is, as you said, played by a very competent guest actor who understands, like, my goal is to flirt with Colin Trenier, and I'm going to flirt with Colin Trenier super hard. I'm going to find different little flirty things to do. I'm going to position myself. I'm going to smile. I'm going to put my hand on his shoulder. I'm going to resort to give him a foot job later because he's not picking up what I'm putting down. Like, each step, it's her just be like, you can take it out now. You know, that breathy sort of like,
Oh yeah, that
that she just goes for it, and
like
it's
it's Rick
great.
Berman's mouth, his lips right to my ear with that dialogue about it. She's competent too. I mean, she's some sort of a scientist showing them how to use a new electron microscope or some cool stuff, and it's Trip that's setting it up. I like how she does a Phlox impression without it feeling bad. Like the cadence she speaks in almost feels like back when Jerry Ryan as 7 and 9 would like imitate other people. Or it was the ones where it was the doctor in her body and she was acting like the doctor. Like there's vibes of that. Like she captures a lot of essence of Phlox without it just being, I'm pretending I am Phlox. So nice job being the second Denoblian and breathing a life into this other race.
Yeah, it provided awesome context about what it's like to be a Denoblian and how different they are from humans in small and in big ways. And it allows you to have like quick hits where, you know, Mayweather shows up for his one scene and he did apparently some sort of weird style of bullfighting and got fucked up. And you got, you know, fucking, you have Hoji's one scene where she accidentally helps Fiesel flirt with Trip. And then you get Reed's one scene where he's like trying to work off his boner by hitting the exercise bike. You know, like, okay, we got to get everybody else in the episode. We'll use the B plot. We'll have them one at a time. They're just like interact with Trip about what shit he's up to. Maybe not, maybe not having sex with the doctor's wife. And then, you know, you end it with Trip like, hey, your wife's flirting with me, and he's like, ooh, has she given you a rose petal bath yet? He's excited for him to fuck his wife, and is like, oh, it's your loss for not taking advantage. I was like, oh, perfect. Like, they showed that he's probably going to be fine with this. It's happening in front of him. He's enthusiastic about the idea. He thinks that intimacy should be shared between people who are interested. That's part of their culture.
Here's a bad part of this B plot for me. It's paired with a place it doesn't belong, but I'm tired of Trip. People want to fuck Trip episodes. Unless it's a fucking Pokemon slug, it's probably trying to fuck Trip. And here and there, I can do that. But I mean, this is hot on the heels of fucking that Precious Cargo trash. And just over and over, you could have taken anybody else and plugged them into this plot, and it would have worked just fine. And Mayweather specifically, I think, especially, he's had kind of a goofy relationship with the doctor, too, who tried to fucking lobotomize him not too long ago. Like, that would have been a real good person. Like, I don't feel comfortable because I am sick and fucked up a lot, and this dude has a scalpel by my eyes all the time. I think Reed might have actually been the most interesting, because here's a guy that we know is a player and is DTF, but also this consummate professional.
Reed would have fucked her. Reed would have absolutely plowed her. Are you kidding me? As soon as he got the go light, he would have been like, let's do it.
Which would have been an interesting resolution itself, but the steps leading, because he's the main person saying, do not bring it up to Phlox. So again, this is just more like, oh, here's a guy that we're going to try and paint as the main sexual object other than to Paul. He's going to be the target of all of her affection, and you make it Hoshi that's getting hit on, right?
Yeah. And they've already like kind of broke glass on doing the gay thing at this point, like legitimately.
It's a gay if this is supposed to be a gay analog episode, like, then
go for it, yeah. And
then the next problem with it being Trip is that Trip is supposed to be T'Pol's confidant. If there's a episode this season where Trip needs to be there for T'Pol, as he's already established himself as like her shoulder to cry on, he should have been super involved in this, right?
And you know what I really like about, I agree, Trip should have been involved with the A plot. That is a bit of a miss. But the more I think about the idea of like Hoshi being the object of Fiesel's affections, it works better to me, because Hoshi's pre-established as friends with the doctor.
Yes.
And so like there's more going on there where like she's going to be hesitant. Well, that's how you can play it, right? Like you don't have to, it's the 22nd century, and just be like, of course, Hoshi's into girls as well as men, or both, or neither, or whatever. Like, make whatever choice you want to make there narratively, so that's not the focus. Instead, it's, I don't know if I want to be intimate with the wife of my friend. That's too weird.
Arguably my second best friend, maybe even best friend.
Yeah, probably best friend on the ship.
There's a lot of and this is, I'm going to say, the Barge of the Dead problem that this episode has is Trip being the sexual attention center isn't bad. It's just, it's been done several times before this. They were all way worse. So even though this is a good example, it is bad because of where it's falling in the order of let's seduce Trip. And then my biggest complaint in all of this is the A plot hinges on the fact that that basically she was sexually attacked, right? There were unwanted advances that has created this catastrophic situation with her. The main part of the A story is that, prejudice against homosexuals and people with HIV is bad. And also, hey, sexual assault's not okay, and no means no, right? And then you flip over to this fucking zany B plot, which is, okay, well, if it's a girl giving you these, not taking the hint and forcing herself, then it's cheeky and funny. And it's like, what the fuck? What's the last? There was another episode where, like,
okay.
It was a Space Texan fucking episode, right? Where we're like led to believe, like, no, the Space Texans have unjustly persecuted all these people, and they're all going to be murdered for no good reason.
Nah, it turns out the guy who is actually the minority that is being oppressed is actually the bad guy.
The world's biggest piece of shit, and they deserve
like,
after all.
Oh, that seems.
What were you trying to do here? Because you just undid a lot. But okay, well, again, once the roles are changed and it's the girl who's not taking no for an answer, then it's a silly, funny comedy episode.
Well, we are not watching a silly, funny comedy episode or a very special episode about AIDS next week. What are we watching?
We're getting into season 2. I'm also going to go ahead and call this a good episode.
Yeah,
I think if
good.
the B plot hadn't been there, and it's not that it's bad B plot, I think there could have been a great episode on it.
I think it's good, even and I think the B plot's good. They don't belong together, and it prevents it from being great. But I still like chicken and chocolate, even if I would never combine them.
Could you combine those? I'm sure someone in the trauma support group will come up with a good combination. But yeah, of course,
I can see the post on Discord. It'll probably be from one of those godless heathen Australians. That sounds like something a criminal island would do. You all heard me. See, now I've got to call out our other fans, so we'll have none.
Yeah.
To listen to what we're reviewing next week, which is
Season 2, episode 15, Ceasefire. This is going to be Chris Black and David Stratton. All right, I see Enterprise, and there's 3 ships I don't recognize, and there's 2 Vulcan ships. Archer is called in to mediate a territorial dispute between the Vulcans and the Andorians. Fucking finally.
Yes, we're getting back to your good friend. You mentioned him already this week. He's back.
That's
again.
what I needed. That's the ladder I need to climb out of the latrine pit of season poo.
We might, in fact, call it season 2 after next week. We might restore some dignity to this nonsense that we've had to endure after next week.
Why is it taking this long to get to good stuff? Why am I having to wait until episode 15 to get to where clearly is some shit I care about?
There are a good handful of episodes in season 2 I just forgot they were all in the back half. This was one of them. I didn't really consider Catwalk one of them. It wasn't one that stuck out in my memory, but I certainly considered this next week for Ceasefire. There's a few more: Regeneration, First Flight, and then The Expanse and Horizon are all in this season, and they're all very good in my opinion. So we will have some gems as we work through the back half.
Gems.
Little compressed pieces of poop that turn into diamonds.
Nice.
All right, we'll see you next week.